Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Reserved Investments, and thank you for joining me. This is part 3 of my 18,000 subscriber Q&A series. I've got about 20 minutes to get through some of these questions before we end this video. So let's see how far we get. Question 1. Why did the Silent Hill games, US versions, shoot up in price when there are more accessible ways to play them? Simple supply versus demand. A lot of these games are now well over 20 years of age, and video game collectors want to own and interact with the original versions. So it's a nostalgic thing on one hand of the equation. On the other end of the equation, you have the excellent remake of Silent Hill 2 that was just released on the Sony PlayStation 5. So there's a lot of people that are discovering Silent Hill 2 for the first time on the Sony PlayStation 5, and they're going, well, gee, this game was spectacular. Maybe they weren't into video games or even alive back when it originally came out, so now they want to experience other games in the series. This is causing demand for those games at present time. So that is why those games are trending for the prices that they're trending for right now, even though you are correct. They are more accessible ways to play them. Now, to be fair, video game collectors want to own the original games. If you're just somebody that wants to play these games for the very first time, or maybe you want to revisit them and you don't want to own the originals, you're right. You'll seek out a much cheaper way to play these games. This kind of ties in to the argument that I had during the great video game bubble, where people would come to me and go, oh, Sean, you don't understand. Everybody loves Mario. Everybody loves Zelda. Everybody loves Metroid. These games are going to the moon, and they're going to go even higher. And what is it that I told you guys? A collector cares about factory sealed examples of those items. If somebody just wants to play Super Mario Brothers, they can do that very easily for just a few dollars. They don't even have to hunt down original hardware to play those games. If they have a Nintendo Switch, or if they have an NES Classic Edition, they can play it that way. So that's what everybody gets wrong about this market. It's simple supply and demand based on nostalgia. And it also has to do with original video game collectors wanting the original versions. So I hope that answered your question in full. Next question. Why do you stay away from Yu-Gi-Oh? Is it because of reprints? Well, here's the thing. If I'm going to allocate capital to a collectible card game, and I know Pokemon is the all-time most popular media franchise in existence, and Magic the Gathering is the second most collectible card game of all time, why would I divert capital to Yu-Gi-Oh? The only way I would do that is if I had a nostalgic emotional attachment to that franchise. And if you do, hey, there are some vintage Yu-Gi-Oh cards that do command a lot of money on the secondary market. Yu-Gi-Oh does have organic collectability. But overall, for someone like me, I would rather invest in vintage Pokemon cards and early Magic the Gathering reserve list cards instead. So it's more of a matter of personal opinion, looking at this through the lens of collectible financial investing. Next question. Sean, what are your thoughts about buying games digitally? Not for investment, but for ownership, since most gamers believe they don't truly own their games if they buy them digitally. In all honesty, in the modern era, I do not like digital downloads. There was a brief period of time where I did, back when the Nintendo Wii first came out with the Virtual Console. I thought that was a cool concept, where you could download a Nintendo game for $5, a TurboGrafx 16 game for $6, a Mega Drive or Super Nintendo game for like $8, and I think Neo Geo and Nintendo 64 games were only $10 to download. And you could put it on the console, and you would have it regardless of the fact that they discontinued the Wii Virtual Console shop. So I thought that was very important. And I really liked the price points that those games premiered at. Today, I do not like subscription-based systems. I don't like paying $20 to download a game. Then the system breaks or something happens. You no longer have access to that game. So that is my problem with modern era digital-only games. And I honestly don't think we'll ever get back to a time where Nintendo would bring back the Virtual Console, simply because Nintendo is going the direction of subscription service, like online for the Switch, where you have to pay a fee every month or every year, and then you get access to the back catalog of games. I am completely against that. It's just like when we talk about Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, HBO Max, all these crazy streaming services. I'm getting sick of it. I would rather own the physical media if possible. I could do what I want with it. I can watch it whenever I want. So that should be your answer. I am not a fan of digital downloads of the modern era. Next question. Hi, Sean. Congrats on 18,000 subscribers. I remember when you had less than 1,000 subscribers. My question would be regarding the vintage audio collectible scene. For media like CDs, cassettes, and vinyl, do you think CDs are going to be popular again? It's a niche market. It's never going to be as popular as vinyl because vinyl has a unique sound. CDs really don't offer anything but the ownership of that piece of physical media. It's almost like 8-track collecting or even cassette collecting. CDs are a step above that, but in all honesty, I would rather go with vintage vinyl records because even younger collectors, the younger generations out there, have already gravitated towards the unique sound of vinyl. I mean, if you go to Walmart, if you go to Target, you go to Barnes & Noble, they all sell modern era pressings of popular artists like Taylor Swift. So I think that that market has more legs than, say, trying to speculate on CDs or cassettes or, heaven forbid, 8-track tapes. Now, do I think that there is some collectability for certain CDs and cassettes? Yes. If the music was released in a limited form, there are certain cassettes and CDs out there that sell for a premium in the secondary market. I'm sure that you've heard of Discogs. If you ever log on to Discogs, you can see the collectability of some of that stuff. But for the most part, if you're going to invest heavy money in this market, I would tell you to go after vintage vinyl. Vintage vinyl, again, it has a unique sound and it is highly collectible. I don't see that changing anytime soon. It is more of a niche market. Collecting vintage vinyl isn't as popular as, say, sports card collecting or comic book collecting or coin collecting, but it's an established market for the most part. It's not going to die out overnight. It's not really speculative. So there is some more opportunity there than other collecting categories. If you're going after CDs, in my opinion, that's very niche. So I would rather you go after the vinyl because we already know that's an established collecting category. You go on to ask some other questions here. Regarding tube amps and vintage speakers, do you see that market declining as Gen X gets older? The answer is yes. That's a very niche market. Be careful if you're playing in the market for vintage audio. That is a limited market, in my opinion. There used to be certain auction houses would take that stuff. They're getting fewer and fewer because, again, it's more popular amongst older individuals, and the market is changing and evolving. Case in point, if a younger music enthusiast wants to listen to vinyl records, they can log on to Amazon and they can order a turntable that was produced by Audio-Technica, and they can get a top quality turntable that's literally produced in the year 2025. So that is a major development in that market where a lot of younger enthusiasts are just going to log on to Amazon. They're going to order their turntables that are produced by Audio-Technica rather than go after the original vintage equipment that they never interacted with, they never owned in most cases. Now, are there going to be some exceptions to that rule where you get a little quirky person that goes, you know what, I'm going to play with the vintage stuff. I want to own nothing but the vintage stuff. Yes, but that's the exception, not the rule. So that's how I would guide you in that market. Just use caution. If you want to invest in that market, vinyl's the way to go, in my opinion. Next question. Sean, is it worth collecting Nintendo Switch games with the Nintendo Switch 2 on the horizon? The answer is yes. I've done a video on this. The problem that you have is there's a lot of supply out there and people are hoarding this stuff. Case in point, somebody sent me an email after one of my videos went viral talking about this, and they told me that they have 100 factory sealed copies of Super Mario RPG, the remake, for the Nintendo Switch console. And they got them all at a price of $29.99. Now you do the math how much they spent to acquire those 100 factory sealed copies of that particular game. My point is, this is a common occurrence anymore. If we get in my DeLorean time machine and we go back to the 80s and 90s, not everybody was hoarding factory sealed Nintendo games, whether it was from the Nintendo era, the Super Nintendo era, the Nintendo 64 era, even the Nintendo GameCube era. The hoarding of factory sealed Nintendo games really got its start during the Nintendo Wii era, where you'd go to Toys R Us, you would see some of these games selling for as little as $10, $15, $20. There were people that were going into the market and they were buying up a large quantity of these games. Now, there is one other way to look at this, though. If we look at what happened with the Nintendo Switch, the Nintendo 3DS, back when that was discontinued, some of the more esoteric games shot up in value, and there are a lot of those games in existence. So if you are hoarding Nintendo Switch games, I think there's going to be a lot of supply, but there's also going to be some demand, because even 20 years from now, the generation that grew up owning a Nintendo Switch is probably going to want to revisit that system because it does have a major nostalgic pull. Do I think the person that paid $29.99 for 100 copies of Super Mario RPG Remake to keep them factory sealed, do I think that was a wise investment? No, because you got to look at the opportunity cost and the time value of money. That person is tying up money on a speculative asset that pays no underlying cash flows, meaning he's not getting a dividend, he's not getting any interest payment to put those items away, hoping that when Nintendo pulls the plug on production of that game and the original Nintendo Switch, if that game goes up in value and he sells into the market, that could be 5, 10, 15 years from now. It's unknown. So I would not recommend doing that. But I do know a lot of people are hoarding this stuff, like when Walmart puts games on clearance, when Amazon drops the price on some of this stuff. I have seen people even hoard stuff like the Capcom versus Marvel fighting collection for the Nintendo Switch. I know people that are sitting on 50 to 100 copies of that, and they paid full retail price for it, which I think is ridiculous. I mean, you can do the math on how much this is costing just to put those games in storage or in a spare bedroom, waiting for them to be discontinued and potentially go up in value in the secondary market. That's why the market's going to be flooded with a lot of this stuff a couple of years from now. It wasn't like back in the day where if you went to Toys R Us and they had a Nintendo game on clearance and you said to your parents or your best friend, hey, I'm going to buy a copy and keep it sealed, people will look at you like you're nuts. Today, that's the norm. I mean, I see people in Best Buy, I see people in Target all the time buying multiple copies of the same Nintendo Switch game when it goes on sale. That doesn't bode well for the market going forward. Always remember, for something to become truly collectible, it's usually the items that weren't hoarded in mass. If you think about comic books, that copy of Action Comics 1 that hit the newsstand back in 1938, 1939, it wasn't immediately bought and looked at like a collectible. That's why there's so few of those particular comic books in existence today, and that's why they command millions of dollars on the secondary market on average. So I hope that that helps you, and I hope that you understand that there's going to be a lot of hoarding of all of these mass-produced products going forward. Whether it's Lego sets, video games, Pokemon cards, Funko Pops, heaven forbid, whatever it is, people are always going to be hoarding this stuff because, again, the younger set that doesn't understand collectible finance, they look at everything as a quote-unquote investment or an asset, unfortunately. More on that in further upcoming videos. Next question, and I don't like the way this question is worded, but I'm going to answer it. Sean, if you had to live in a house built out of Pokemon booster boxes, which series or sets would you go with and why? Asking for a friend. Okay, I have no desire to live in a Pokeball. I have no desire to live in a house built of Pokemon booster boxes. What I will tell you is, if I was going to invest in vintage Pokemon cards, and hint, 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 I do invest in vintage Pokemon cards, the 3 sets that I would go after are Team Rocket, Gym Challenge, and Skyridge. Those are the 3 sets I like the most. I do not like Fossil. I do not like Jungle because, in my opinion, it just appears to me that there's a lot of that product out there on the market. A lot of people hoarded that stuff, and it's still readily available. I like Team Rocket, Gym Challenge, Sky Ridge. I think that there are some challenging cards to get in those sets, and I think if you are investing in vintage Pokemon cards, those are the sets to go after. There's some key cards in each of those sets, which I'm not going to name in this video, that you should have your eye on if you are investing in that market. Next question. Sean, what is your opinion of the alternate art comic book cover market? I do not like any alternate art comic books. I don't like variants. The only variant I like in the comic book world is the price variant of the original #1 Star Wars issue from, I think, 1977 Marvel Comics. That's the only variant I actually like that has true investment potential in my mind. And if you read the Overstreet Comic Book Price Guide, apparently a lot of people agree with me in that assessment. But I do not like any type of alternate art comic book covers, limited edition comic book covers. It just reminds me of what happened back in the day with the speculative comic book boom. If you guys remember that era, the 1990s, it still leaves a bad taste in my mouth. So I do not like mass-produced scarcity. I don't like any of these holofoil variant gimmicks that happened during that particular point in time. So just do with that information what you will. One last question before we end this particular Q&A video. Do you have any recommendations for people that basically start off at zero but pay a mortgage and invest into their retirement accounts? Something you would personally recommend for people to read to get ahead? The answer is yes, and these are all finance books. The first book you want to read is The Little Book of Common Sense Investing by John Bogle. If you don't know who John Bogle is, slap yourself upside the head. He's the founder of the investment group known as Vanguard. I've met the man personally back when he was alive. I listened to him speak in person. It changed my life. The next book you need to read is The Psychology of Money. You need to understand your own relationship with money so you can understand your spending, investing, and saving habits. Another book that you should read is Just Keep Buying. And please remember, this does not apply to Pokemon cards and graded video games or other speculative assets. The book's name means you should stay the course and continually to invest in index funds and ETFs through thick and thin. That's how you build wealth. Another book I'm going to recommend is A Random Walk Down Wall Street, which will teach you why investing in index funds and ETFs is much better than trying to go after individual stocks over the long term or even over the short term. The final book that I will recommend to you, if you're somebody that's new, starting out, doesn't understand the difference between a mutual fund or an ETF or how brokerage accounts work, get yourself a copy of the book, Investing for Dummies. And again, that's not an insult. We're all starting at a different place in this wonderful world known as life. With that, that concludes part 3 of the 18,000 subscriber Q&A series. Let me know in the comment section below what you think of this content, the questions asked, and my answers. And I will see you, hopefully, in part 4. I have to cut this short a little bit because I am late to a meeting. Thank you for watching and have a great night.